Hello and welcome to the third episode of Bar Talk, the Albin Oldner Law Group podcast. My name is Michael Murphy. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Albin Oldner Law. And today we are joined by a very, very special guest, Chris Oldner, Senior Partner of Albin Oldner Law. And if you recall, our last podcast was with Todd Albin, the Managing Partner of Albin Oldner Law. And I think we set the bar low enough with Todd that this shouldn't be that big of a problem.
I appreciate you making it easy for me.
But thank you so much for being here, Chris. You know, really like we did in our last podcast, I want to spend a little bit of time just so people can get to know you, a little bit about you, about your background, how you eventually made your way here to the firm. And for people who don't know, you graduated law school from Texas Tech University, and I think your first job out of law school was in Tyler, working for the District Attorney's Office in Tyler.
Smith County District Attorney is a misdemeanor prosecutor.
Misdemeanor prosecutor. I can't only imagine the sort of cases that you came across.
Everything you can imagine that happens in East Texas, yes, I got to handle all of that, yeah.
And then you moved from Tyler to Dallas, and you became a prosecutor in the DA's office in Dallas, or actually in Collin County. In Collin County, I'm sorry. And you did that for a couple of years. And then you became a judge.
Yeah, I spent 8 years in the Collin County District Attorney's Office, working my way up, and eventually decided that the people who were deciding my cases and making decisions, that was an important job, and I wanted to make sure the right decisions were made, so decided to run for judge.
And so it's a public office.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just curious, stepping back at that time, what were kind of some of the motivations? I mean, you clearly just identified one of those as far as, but being a little facetious. But did you ever thought you wanted to seek a public office?
I always had an idea that I liked public service. I mean, the idea that you're doing something that's good for society, in addition to doing something that is challenging and good for your career, it all came together in that position. The reality is, it was more, though, being in the courtroom, trying those cases, testing some of the difficult legal issues. I knew that I wanted a person on that bench who was going to handle them correctly and going to do what's right for the citizens and what's right for that case. And the only way to make sure at least one person was going to be that way is to actually take responsibility for it and run.
Yeah. So, judge in Collin County for a total of
16 years, 8 months. I say 17 years, but I'm rounding up. 16 years, 8 months, starting at County Court of Law, and then got appointed to the district bench and served there for 13 years.
So I know you're very understated about being appointed to the district bench. It's just not like something you wake up and it happens. So can you tell us a little bit about the process, about how you became appointed, who appointed you, and the background around that?
So 2003, the legislature approved 2 district benches for Collin County because of our growth. One to come online in the September of that year, the next one to come online a year later. So the 416th coming online September of that year, a year later the 417th came online. So literally it was a matter of filling out an application, contacting people you knew that had influence and power, and asking them to put a good word in for you. And then contacting your local political delegation, your representatives, your senators, and saying, I want this position, will you support me? So I put my application in, interviewed with the governor's office. It was Rick Perry at the time, Governor Goodhair, that was in office at that time. And it was a long, complicated process. I hear this debate all the time, whether you should appoint or elect judges. The most political process I've ever been through is the appointment process. And it's all done behind closed doors. What makes a difference and what actually makes you rise to the top, I can't tell you for sure. I'd like to say, obviously the best choice was made at the time. But the reality is, when I got the call for that appointment, the first thing I did is start getting calls from everybody else I knew who had put in for that appointment, telling me, I didn't get it. Have you gotten a call yet? I didn't get it. Have you gotten a call yet? Literally, I was on the phone with what I thought was a very good candidate for that position saying, I didn't get it. Have you gotten a call yet? As I was talking to them, I get it. My call's interrupted by the governor's office calling me to say I've been appointed.
Wow. I kind of assumed it was a bit of a political process, right?
Inevitably so.
Inevitably so. So 13 years as a judge and...
as a district judge.
As a district judge. And then you decide, I've done what I can do, and you decide to go back to becoming private practicing attorney. And you joined Albin Oldner in 2020. So clearly at that point you can see the downward spiral kind of happening in your...
It was Dante's seventh ring by that
District
point.
Court Judge Albin Oldner. I can see
We all make compromises.
No. In serious though, you lead our family law practice, which is a very large practice within the firm. We have 7 attorneys, including yourself. In addition to having your own clients, managing the practice, being a leader and mentor for everybody here in the team here, it's a full plate, and I'm just curious how tough of a transition was it to go from being a judge and being a judge for a long time, and kind of going back and being on the other side, kind of where you started really as a prosecutor, but being on the other side, was that a big? Did you have to kind of reinvent yourself, or did it just flow seamlessly going back to being a lawyer?
It was an interesting experience. I had a conversation with a person who's a sitting judge now, who's a friend of mine. When I decided to make the transition, I went through and told each of the judges, I'm retiring, I'm not going to run for this bench again. And when I did that, one of the judges said to me, I could never do that. And I said, what do you mean? I could never go back to just being a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And I remember at the time thinking, just a lawyer? What's that like, just a lawyer? Because really, your lawyer, being a lawyer, is the one who controls everything. You decide what to argue, what to ask the court to do. You are the one advocating for your client. And that's something that I always missed as being a judge, is that advocacy. But the first case I had after I got off, where it was a contested hearing and I went in front of a judge I knew, it was a judge in Dallas, it was very odd. I had a hard time separating the idea that I'm deciding an issue and listening to both sides to I'm advocating for an issue and a particular point of view and a particular interpretation of the law. And that translation, that movement to advocate, wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. It's funny, because 5 years later, 6 years later, after being on the bench, I'm in a hearing 5 or 6 months ago, arguing a point, and I'm making a very passionate argument, have a witness on the stand, and as I'm asking this witness this question, the other side stands up and objects, and I turn around and said, overruled.
Yeah, I was gonna... As long as you don't overrule yourself. But I mean, I could just see it, like, it's just instincts, right? It just
literally. And everybody stopped, and the judge laughed, and the opposing counsel, thank goodness, laughed as well, and the judge looked at me and goes, you're right, overruled. And so I went on with my questions. Yeah. But it's hard to get out of that mindset, but it really has been a gift. It really has been, to find that advocacy again and being able to take people and argue for their position in the courtroom.
Well, it's very cool that I get to see too, as I joined the firm, and you've been very gracious, including me in, a lot of what we do in the family law side. Mm-hmm. But, having that context that you just described and having that experience, we sit down and, are discussing things, and attorneys are discussing things, and your ability to be able to share with them the insights potentially from the judge that they're going to be sitting with, and just that level of experience, and kind of having the instinct saying, that wouldn't fly with me in court. I don't think it's going to fly with and the way we can add value to our clients, having that level of experience, having that insight, knowing what works, knowing what doesn't work, quite frankly, knowing the personalities of the people that we're arguing with and against. I mean, that's a tremendous asset, that not everybody has. And do you feel that when you go into court, though, that there's an undue amount of pressure on you because of what you were doing prior in the court?
I don't know that I've ever considered it to be more pressure. I agree with you, it's invaluable. Yeah. That I have that insight, and to be able to use that, and what I always preach to every attorney we work with here, everything has to be viewed from what the judge is going to see, what the judge is going to think, because that's the person making the decision. And what you have to do is you have to make the decision you want the judge to make, the easy one, mm-hmm. for the judge. And if you view everything through that lens and how it's going to be received, it's not about how you send it, it's how it's going to be received that matters. It makes all the difference. When I go in the courtroom, I was wrong how much, I knew I missed advocacy. I knew I missed the thrill and the fun of the argument. That's why I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place, is that the fun of the argument. I didn't realize how much I missed it until I had the opportunity to go in there again and make those arguments. It's exciting, it's fun. I never really considered it as pressure. Now maybe I will. I don't know. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because those who watched the last podcast with Todd, asking what how did he know, or what were his attributes younger, as how he wanted to become an attorney. And people who know Todd, I asked him this question. I said, were you argumentative? And of course his answer was, no, I'm not arguing. I was just a smart ass, but argumentative.
I could answer that.
But it's interesting though that you mentioned though the thrill of the argument, right? As an attorney. So a couple more things though real quick. So within all of this though, I think you definitely have, an extremely well-known specialty throughout the state, right? And it's what we call alternative dispute resolution, also known as mediation. I mean, you get called from all parts to mediate cases. Can you talk a little bit about what that is, what alternative dispute resolution is, why it's so important to what we do, what you do, and I think also a little education on people, because I hear people use the term mediation and arbitration in the same sentence, and yet they're very different things.
Very different.
So could you give a little, kind of piece on what you do, and how you've been able to obviously accumulate that reputation, but then talk a little bit about the differences between the two.
And I think what really enhances that is the judicial experience. So having been through that place of being a neutral and making the decision has enhanced my ability to translate that into a place where I'm a neutral, but I'm not making the decision. I'm trying to facilitate the individuals in the disagreement to make the decision for themselves, keep that control. Litigation is a horribly messy process. It is high pressure, it is high risk, it is expensive, it is honestly a last resort. The last resort should be going into the courtroom. Mediation is a off-ramp on the highway to litigation. It is a place where you can go by, assess, and make a smart decision for you, for your kids, for your business, whatever it is, about how to lower the temperature, how to reduce the conflict, how to find a resolution that makes sense. It's not going to be everything you want it to be, but it's also not going to be everything the other side wants it to be. It's a compromise to keep the some semblance of control over where you are. Because when you're in the courtroom, it's war. It's war. And you want to avoid that at all costs if you can. So mediation gives me the opportunity to work with people and say, listen, here's an understanding of what it's going to be like if you decide to go to court. Here is how the judge is going to treat that. I know, because I made these decisions day in and day out. I was a general jurisdiction court. I heard family, civil, and criminal. I heard everything. You need to know how messy this is going to get and the risk you're going to take to get there. After paying attorney's fees, because good lawyers are not cheap, after paying the attorney's fees to get there, you still may lose. So why not avoid that risk? Keep control of your case, keep control of your outcome, and let's compromise and move this case forward. If you have good lawyers on the case, if you have litigants who are willing to listen, you can make a lot of progress in mediation.
I love the analogy of the off-ramp. Now, real quick about arbitration, because people confuse the two. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Arbitration really is a process that takes the place of the litigation model. It's still a contested situation. You're not compromising and settling a case. You're presenting, instead of to a judge or a jury, you're presenting to an arbitrator the same issues that you would present in the courtroom. It offers a little more privacy, a little more control over timing, because court's availability is dependent on how many other cases they have to decide. But it really is still an argument and a neutral who makes a decision. So somebody is dictating to you what the answer is going to be. It's just an arbitrator instead of a judge.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, one last question, then we're gonna pivot here just for a minute. So one of the things that I've learned and that I never really thought of, and I don't know if people really think about this much, is that especially with family law, just the kind of mental strain and mental challenges that family law attorneys go through. And granted, our job is to think about our clients, right? But the notion, let's be honest, right? Our clients in family law, some of their best days are still really bad days. And we're in the middle of it with them. Over all of these years, how did you manage not to let the stress and strain and at times emotional discord, get to you as a family law attorney?
And that's the real challenge. And I talk to my younger attorneys about that all the time. The stress of this job can be overwhelming, and burnout is very high. My last job before I got elected to the bench was as the chief of the Crimes Against Children Division, the Collin County District Attorney's Office. So I was dealing with nothing but child abuse cases, 24/7, every day. High stress, high burnout, obviously miserable things to have to deal with. On the bench, same thing. You're dealing with the stress. My wife used to joke about this. I'm dealing with capital murder cases. I'm dealing with high-dollar civil cases, and I'm dealing with family law cases. The cases that literally kept me awake at night were the family law cases. The ones where there were allegations that you had to sort out and try to decide whether they're true. Part of my mantra has always been, we're trying to make this better. We are trying to fix it. We can't stop that whatever the bad thing is happened, or that you're in the middle of a bad situation. We're here to try to make it better. And so the idea that you're part of a solution of trying to move this forward helps perspective and helps attitude.
Yeah.
And I think it makes it a little easier to deal with the high stress we have.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And so let's change a little bit. So being very transparent with you, when I first met you, not that I know a lot of judges, and thankfully haven't appeared in court too many times myself, but I think there are stereotypes, right? So you see a person that's behind with this black gown on, right? Or cape in your regard.
Certainly.
But you don't know who the person is. You just have this. So the stereotype is either you're Judge Judy, or or you're a Supreme Court judge, or you know what I'm saying. And meeting you, I would have never, with your personality, your sense of humor, just how you view things, and so not the judge. I would have never. Someone said, "Okay, this guy's a judge," but. Is that a challenge? Do you get stereotyped as being a certain way and having to act a certain way, and you know what I mean? And is it a stereotype that bothers you, or?
I think people who don't know me have a certain vision of what a judge is, and it's usually that somber,
right,
slightly overweight, wearing the white wig, and what would be called in some situations a resting bitch face. Just and. That's never fit me. Right. I've always been a person that took pride in my ability to connect and communicate with other people. Even in the courtroom, I was one that tried to put people at ease.
Right.
Now, I expected behavior to be on point. I expected you to be prepared, right. And there was not going to be compromising in that area. But I wasn't going to be overbearing. Mm-hmm. I wasn't going to insist on imposing on you. Yeah. Whatever morality or viewpoint I had at that time. I was simply going to give you an answer the best I could and try to get it right. And part of that is counter to what a lot of people see as the stereotypical judge to be. Mm-hmm. The reality is judges are just human beings. Yeah. They all have their faults. They all have their quirks. They all have their likes and dislikes. And part of your approach when you're tailoring your argument for a particular court or a particular judge is kind of knowing those things. You alluded to that earlier. It isn't, that judge is not going to, no judge on the bench is going to do me a favor simply because I'm a former colleague. They're going to follow the law. They're going to do what they think is right, as they should. But if I know their particular quirks, their particular likes, the way they view things in the world, it helps me tailor my arguments to what that particular worldview is. And you'd be foolish not to think that an individual's worldview affects the way they rule. Yeah. It absolutely does.
Yeah. No, I was, I remember when we first met, and I wasn't even sure. It's like, when you're a retired judge, do you still address, you as Judge Oldner? And I remember you just saying, no, call me Your Highness, which I thought, okay, says a lot about the ego, but no. Anyways, it cracked me up because I had this certain, what am I walking into? And completely like, no, it's all cool. It's going to be just fine. So I appreciate that. So we just got a couple minutes left, and this has been great. People have gotten to know a little bit about your background, but also your passion for what you do for us here at the firm, your leadership role, people you work with. We're going to play a little true false, so people can kind of get to know you personally, even just a little bit more. So first one, true or false. Billy Corgan and Smashing Pumpkins is one of your absolute favorite bands.
True.
For those of you under the age of 30 watching this, just Google Smashing Pumpkins and you'll figure it out. True or false, you'd come to work every day on a skateboard?
False, although I wouldn't mind it. If I were close enough, maybe.
So you had mentioned early on that you were actually appointed as a state district court judge by Governor Rick Perry. True or false, you've actually met Rick Perry?
True.
Okay.
Although he didn't actually do the interview. That was his office and the appointment secretary, but I have met him.
You have met him. Okay. So one last one. And one of your, I think, claim to fame is really that in all of your time on the bench, you have never had a ruling overturned, at least in state court. And we did some investigating. We found out that actually, though, prior to that, you actually did have a ruling overturned. I think it was probably during your Collin County bench days, maybe. And I know you're not nodding your head because I know this is a very sensitive area for you, but you actually did have a ruling overturned. And if we can cue the tape, maybe we could show you the attorney that actually had you overruled. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Crazy white guy dancing at the Mavericks, who is now your partner in the law firm, is the only attorney to ever have you overruled.
Well, my record is not as perfect as that, but you can imagine the brilliant lawyers who make arguments in front of me, the sophisticated intellectual exercises that take place in these environments. And you would expect only the highest quality attorney to be able to accomplish that. And this is what we have.
So this is the great thing about the firm. I mean, what are the odds of this, right? We can't make this up for this podcast. This is actually true. But this is really the cool thing about the firm and how much I enjoy it too, is that you and Todd are extremely talented in your craft. Very different people, very different approaches. And when you put it together, it's just amazing. But it's funny because I think it was the third thing Todd said, oh, by the way, I've had him overruled.
He's a little too proud of that.
A little proud of that. I think you handled it very well. But
even the appellate courts get it wrong sometimes, so that's okay.
But anyways, hey, listen, thank you so much for taking some time.
Sure.
And this has been great. And we want to maybe dive in deeper down the road into some other areas. For all of you who've been watching us on Bar Talk, we really appreciate it. Please make sure that you hit the subscribe button, the like button, send us comments, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Bar Talk. Thank you very much.